Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Edric Show. I am your host, Edric Jerome. This is the place for intelligent conversation with interesting people. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button, ring that notification bell, and you'll get notified when I post content each and every week. I am joined by a very, very special guest today, world renowned chef, culinary historian, and author, Chef Michael Twitty. He's known for his work in preserving African American foodways. Chef Twitty is the James Beard Award winning author of The Cooking Gene, as well as Kosher Soul. And he's here today to discuss his latest book, Recipes from the American South, a collection that delves into the broad history and many cultures of Southern cuisine. Chef Twitty, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you so much. Let's just some random here.
All right. So first of all, let me start out by asking you about. So, The Cooking Gene was a very deeply personal memoir, but Recipes from the American South. Do you still ingrain some of your own personal stories into this, or what are some of the differences, if not?
Yeah, the Cooking Gene was a food memoir with recipes, a few recipes. Sometimes people call it a cookbook, and I don't like that because it's not. Cookbook is a manual. Cookbook is a set of instructions to achieve a goal of hopefully a meal that tastes good to you. In the Cooking Gene, the recipes were evidence. They were there to prop up the narrative, which is, for those who don't know, the Cooking Gene is me telling the story of my ancestors from Africa to America, from enslavement to emancipation. And it is a culinary roots, basically. And I felt like there wasn't really a narrative that was very specific to Black Americans with a Southern heritage. I think there's this attitude that, we had all our stuff taken from us and we just had to start over anew with nothing, which is far from the truth. But also, when you are a people who is in diaspora, we're no different from Jamaicans, Afro-Brazilians, Haitians, and other people. And of course, it's important to acknowledge that those people often were in our bloodline across history, not just in the 20th century. And we have a lot of things in common. But that food journey is one of the miracles that we as Black people possess, and that is to say that for this, I absolutely will tell anybody that, especially in our current cultural and political debate, enslavement was not a gift to us. It wasn't a present. It was an invitation to belong to the West. It was the commodification of Black bodies, the exploitation of Black labor, and the appropriation of Black culture. Having said that, it is still a miracle that we enslaved the habits of the people who enslaved us.
Mm.
They never ate the same, loved the same, if that's a word, were intimate the same, worshiped the same, sang or danced the same ever. And they never will. And in the history of most enslaved peoples, you get subsumed by your captor. And we subsumed them and blackified things and sold it to them and made it better.
Mm.
That's to me, that's a form of power that we need to acknowledge, even if we at the same time acknowledge the pain and the trauma that it cost us. So having said that, I wanted people to have a blueprint for what that would look like, to go through your family and say, okay, we eat this, we're from this place. How can where are the breadcrumbs that will lead us back to home, but also lead to a deeper understanding of what it means to be Black Americans and African Americans ourselves. Recipes from the American South is a swath. Okay. We don't often write these books. About the swath of Southern history and culture. Those are usually reserved for white voices with a lot of support. Okay? When we write books, I think people might say, oh, but Black people write books about Southern food. Yes, of their family, of their community, of their state, of their area, but not the whole thing. We don't take responsibility for what's going on in Appalachia, unless we're Appalachian or Afro-Latin. We don't take, we're not our version of Creole, our version of Low Country, our version of Virginia, but it's never like the whole thing. And I'm fascinated by the whole thing. I grew up watching one of my friends, the late Natalie Dupree, when I was young. When we didn't have any Food Network, we had PBS on a Saturday afternoon. That was it. And just that she had a show called The New Southern Cooking. And when it's funny because I stayed at her home when I was, near middle age, and she gave me a copy, autographed copy, and I'm like, wow, I watched this show on TV when I was younger. But that's what Recipes from the American South is. It's an invitation by me to explore the South through my lens, which is going to be a black lens, and also a lens that appreciates all the different cultures in the South. We're not often part of that conversation either. Because and there's a good reason for this. Number one, there's a lot of gatekeeping on one side, and on the other side, there's a lot of gatekeeping to protect our peace and emotions and feelings. Because the South has not been some big party for us, it has been the greatest American challenge, remains to this day. And when we think we've gotten someplace, you know the phrase, two steps forward.
One step back.
That's right. And now we're looking at three.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's what that's about, and I take great pride in the fact that I might be one of the first black authors to attempt a survey of Southern food.
You have over 200 recipes, so many dishes in the book. Some of them are more iconic than others. Maybe there's some lesser known ones. So maybe give me an example of some of the lesser known dishes you included, and why you think it was so critical to put these in this book.
Okay, so for example, there is oreille de cochon, which is pig's ears. It is not literal pig's ears, and I even note in the book that one thing people fail to do in talking about Southern food is remark on the fact that there are so many foods that have these weird nicknames. It's not actually a cat's head; it's a biscuit.
Hmm.
It's not actually like Susan is limping. It's okra and rice. And I acknowledged to the reader. I said, "This is an African practice. Black people love nicknames. I'm sure there are people in your family you didn't really know their real name until they was gone or married or something. Who is that?
My,
Oh,
my
that's
late grandmother did not know my government name for a
right,
long time.
right." Or my grandmother would go down the list of all the children and grandchildren. She got to the right one. She said, "I don't have a true track mind." So pig's ears is a Cajun pastry where you take it's like, kind of like sopapillas, kind of like beignets in its own way, but you use cane syrup and pecans. So the flour and the fry, the fritter is not just France; it's actually the Middle East through France and North Africa and the Moors. And then comes the cane syrup, the labor of the enslaved, their product. And then comes the pecans, indigenous to the central South United States, but also in deep in Native American foodways. They all come together in this one pastry. There's a makshu, also from Louisiana, which is sort of like succotash, but you see also those same layering. Oh, this is where this came in, and it's not just the food itself or the ingredients; it's the mentality, the mindset of the people who actually said, "Let me see if this works." It's the access, it's seasonality as well. I want to kind of defeat the idea that Southern food is all fried food. There's seasonality involved. You can't just make anything any time of the year. There's life seasons, there's natural seasons, there's ecosystems at work here. And somebody had to know all those different pieces to make those things fit into the year. We like to say in the black culture, our ancestors were people who knew how to make something out of nothing,
Mm, hmm.
and also how to read the environment. And
And make
I
it taste good, not just make
and make
something
it
out of
taste
nothing and
good.
make it taste good. Right.
Right. And also here's the next stage, to understand that how you feel and how you know affects how you cook. And also that our food is part of nostalgia. I joke often. The black mother does not apologize. She never says I'm sorry. What she will do is sit you down to well-made food, and maybe smack you upside the head or kiss you on the cheek or something and say, "You hungry?" That is African American for we cool now, right? I'm sorry, I'm not. There was a conflict, and maybe I wasn't acting the way I should have acted or thought. That's how we do it. We do it through food. We do it through love. We practice romance through food, and so that impacted everything else in the South. And it's one of the only regions where people go, people, even the white Southerners, especially the ones who are raised around us or a part of us, have that same mentality,
Mm.
right? So yeah.
You mentioned pecans, and I had a question specific to pecans because in the press kit there's a picture of a pecan pie, and that resonated with me because my ancestors, my relatives, migrated from to California from Arkansas right around World War II years, right?
Hmm.
That migration west. Pecan pie was such a staple at just about every single family gathering I ever went to, especially when we gathered on Sundays. Um, as an author and a chef, when did you first begin to connect the dots about chronicling African American history through a culinary perspective? Because it's such a powerful way to document our cultural history.
Um. Okay. So there's a lot of weird sort of like things that I put together. Not weird, but my late mom was born on the day that the Africans first arrived at Jamestown. I was born in the year of Haley's Comet, Alex Haley's Comet,
Hmm.
roots,
Hmm.
where we had a great shift towards genealogy and celebration of our heritage. I also grew up with two grandmothers who loved to cook and loved to use food as an expression of their identity and their emotions and their family connections. And I also had a father who, my late dad, was very taught me the Southern way. My mom sort of, but my mom was a part of the Great Migration. They both were, but my dad had more of a connection because of his proximity.
Hmm.
My mother never went to the Deep South ever until way late, and it was one time, it's Alabama. She only saw one part of Alabama one time, and I remember she was not fond of leaving the hotel room.
Hmm.
And and I kind of put the pieces together, and I was like, what's going on?" And I didn't realize that my mom had this not fear, but this reticence because she was the generation that actually saw the Jet magazine with Emmett Till. Her parents didn't want her to go. My father, however, was sent to the country. We didn't have camp. If you weren't in Jack and Jill, if you weren't in that sort, you went to the South. You went to the farm. You know, you had that whole experience of meeting Mr. Crow on his own terms.
Hmm.
You had that whole experience of the well and the cornfield and the cane field and this and that. And I was fascinated with that. And as much as my parents said I didn't listen, I was a very selective listener because I did hear them say certain things and ignored it. But other things, I just listened to every single word. And they didn't think I listened, and I did because I knew how precious and important their stories were. Even my mom used to tell me stories about how in Cincinnati, which is right across the river from the Ohio, from Kentucky, right? The Underground Railroad story, the slavery, right? All that. And she would say that people come over from Kentucky and Tennessee with trucks of watermelons and sorghum and sugarcane and, bags of field peas. And then, of course, when I was growing up, I got to go to Virginia, South Carolina, Alabama, Tennessee, Georgia, North Carolina, places where my family was from. And I still have the pictures of me going to going with my grandfather. First time to South Carolina, I was 5 or 6 years old, and I was petting the cows and feeding the hogs and going to the watermelon patch and picking pecans and doing these things. And I don't know. To this day, my grandfather made it to 99, by the way, and lived to see his great great grandchildren. My grandfather was also, if I should really mention this, one of the founding members of the Federation of Southern Cooperatives, which helped black farmers stay on the land. So I learned very early appreciation for the land, for the people, for the food, and to appreciate and love being Southern on my own terms.
Hmm.
So that hand in hand, everything goes in hand. And then we had cookbooks, man. My mom was a really strong teacher. Like I had to learn measurements in the house, and I had to learn culinary terms. And yet my grandmother would teach me measurements by taking my hands, and she was very gentle with me. She was very much a very doting. I was her favorite out of all the grandchildren, and she would take my hand and go, all right, this is a tablespoon. This is what a cup looks like, half cup. I can still give you not precise, but just with a bit of accuracy with one hand, all those measurements. And she
Hmm.
explained to me, we didn't have no measurements. We didn't have money for that. I'm like, wait a minute, it's cheap. When you're poor, you don't really have. There's no negotiable. There's no negotiables. You do what you got to do. One kid gets one set of clothes that gets passed down to the next one. You do what you got to do. And so I absorbed all these stories, and with the stories came the people, the ancestors. My grandmother could tell me stories about great great grandparents who she never met, who were born into slavery. And then there were stories going back all the way to the first Africans in my family. And I didn't know how precious and how important that was. Because I just think it was, you think of it sometimes, you think, oh, wow, that's just like, that's cool. But no, it's not just cool. It's the antidote to all the nonsense we hear out here.
Hmm.
Can no white person tell me nothing about who I am or tell me where to go to find, or if I'm an American, African American, or whatever. I define that on my own terms. My maternal grandmother, Hazel, Grammy, would tell me that's, when it comes to matters of race, that's why God made gutters to keep the trash on that side and you on the other. And don't ever lie to a white man. He won't lie to you,
Hmm.
even if it hurts his feelings.
Hmm.
Do what you got to do. And that's my whole that mentality. And I'll tell you one little more anecdote.
Sure.
When I was at Howard University, I had the occasion the first year to meet one of my literary heroes, August Wilson. And August Wilson came to Howard, and Dr. Sandra Shannon brought him there, and he was a lion of a man, an absolute lion of a man. And you would think that, but the way he talked and the way he moved, he'd just be like, "No nonsense, don't bother me." I asked the first question of the lecture, crowded hall. And he looked me dead in the eye and gave me this answer, and it was thrilling. It was about, I said, Mr. Wilson, I said, you're right about, how the South is important to us, how we should return to the South. But you ain't never left the South. You always lived in Pittsburgh and up north. And he explained that the South was where we didn't have, the South was where if we owned the business, if we owned the school, if we owned the means of production, we didn't have to deal with other forms of discriminate. We could support ourselves.
Right.
We could feed ourselves. We could have our own culture. So I scrambled together what little I had, allowed college money, and got a $7 copy of Joe Turner's Come and Gone because I already had the fences and the piano lesson. Went to the signing, and August Wilson got up from the table and took me to the side with a line out the door. So you, the young man, asked me that question. I want to talk to you. It was probably 5 to 7 minutes. It felt like an eternity. And he said, what do you want to do? I said, I want to be a writer like you. And he said, I'm going to tell you what I told my daughter, Sakina. I said, I want you to go to the South and find Africa through your grandmother. I didn't think about that for years. He gave me the big old bear hug, signed all my books. I still have them, on the lock and key.
Of course.
And I just think what an opportunity that was to meet one of our greatest. And, a lot of similarities in our life stories. And just have that opportunity and just be like, oh, you got a directive, and you went and did that. And for your listeners, trivial knowledge, Alex Haley and August Wilson passed at the same hospital in Seattle.
Wow.
Yep,
Hmm. Two giants,
connections.
man. Giants. Um, Let me ask you now just about the recipes themselves and preparing the recipes.
Hmm.
Um, are there any particular challenges with um, maintaining authenticity when it comes to preparing some of these older classic recipes? And what I mean by that is, um, how do you balance creating these recipes in a modern kitchen with, electricity and cuisine arts and all that kind of stuff versus creating them as they were at the time? Are there subtle
Ah,
differences? Are there challenges? How do you approach that to really get at that authenticity?
well, I think people need to know the little bit of background in that I actually do well. We used to do more before COVID, but I still do reenactment cooking, or that's reenactment. That's not really historical interpretive cooking. I'm not
Sure,
reenacting anything.
sure.
You want somebody to reenact slavery? Go see Candace Owens and Ben Carson. I am there as a 21st century educator in period clothing. And by the way, there's no such thing as slave clothing. If you really want to go there, there's no such thing as like, where's your raggedy clothing? I mean, that did exist. We ain't gonna lie. But people who worked in domestic situations were generally had not just they went. That's all they were given the better stuff. They maintained things a certain way because it was embarrassing. Watch this, to slaveholders to have people consider they weren't clothing their enslaved chattel a certain way or feeding them a
Right.
certain way.
Status.
Yes, and status. It was more like, like if you had I hate to say this, the precious pet.
Hmm.
Anyways, I cooked in Williamsburg, I cooked in Florida, I cooked in a lot. I cooked in North Carolina, Maryland, Virginia, different plantations, even New York and Philadelphia. Okay. 18th and 19th century. So when I cook that way, I feel more consistent. I feel more at home because I have ancestral help. But then you got to bring it into the house, right? So when I go cook in a restaurant kitchen or a commercial kitchen, it's like a whole other language because there's cans to open and there's this to
Right.
do and there's that and there's machines that aren't the same as putting a cast iron pot, a Dutch oven on a fire and waiting.
And time, even the
And
time
time,
aspect.
that's the
Right.
most
Right.
important ingredient is time. Thank you, sir. That is the most important ingredient because people don't realize that, you can do most anything you do in a modern kitchen in a hearth. But the time is going to, sometimes the time is quicker than you think. And sometimes the time is much longer and much it requires patience and delayed gratification.
Hmm.
And then you go into the kitchen. So the question about authenticity works like this. I want people to understand that Southern food, like any other cuisine, is dynamic, especially because it's based on seasonality and what you can get, what you can acquire in your ecosystem. And then also there are things that we brought into the food that were obviously from far off. It would surprise people to learn that people were bartering, buying, selling all the time, and then especially if you lived in like a southern coastal place like Baltimore. I know y'all are saying Baltimore ain't the South. It was then. Annapolis, Georgetown, which became part of Washington D.C., Richmond, Norfolk, then going down to Wilmington, Edenton, North Carolina, reverse that, and then on to Charleston, Savannah, New Orleans, Mobile, other places. You had access to spices and food such in the West Indies. People were growing bananas and plantain and oranges and things when they could. But you also had people, it's important to remember that maybe 50, 100 miles in, some of those things start to wane and you got to eat what you got to eat. So certain wild foods like the pawpaw and the persimmon become more important. And ramps, things that people just don't eat as much today. Wild foods. There are resurgences. So the question is, what about the peaches? Well, we got lots of peaches today, but not the same peaches they had back then. Some were better than others. I grow a whole garden here in Virginia full of heirlooms. Okay, 4 or 5 different heirloom tomatoes, including the Plateau Haiti, which was brought by Haitian immigrants from Haiti during the Haitian Revolution. One of the only tomatoes that we have in the heirloom tomato repertoire that has a black history. Okay, so it's an issue. Authenticity is an issue of the type of eggs, the type of chickens, the breed of chickens, the type of fruit, the access to wild foods. I mean, it's a long category. Then there's the authenticity of how are you actually doing the recipe? We have to remember these recipes were meant to be dynamic and not static. They were meant to change. We are an improvisational people. So therefore, we're gonna have jazz one way or the other because we have to. That's how we survive. That's how we do things. But we also have to ask the question, what has to stay? What has to stay to make this and nothing else? Identity is not open arms. Identity is closed fingers.
Hmm.
I am in the desert, but I ain't the desert because I'm walking on 2 feet. Let's say quadruped. I'm walking on 2 feet, and I'm a human being, and I'm not the sand. I'm not the cactus. Whatever. So the same thing goes for this. See, authenticity is really in just intention and definition. It has very little to do because our peaches aren't the same. Our tomatoes may not be the same. Our eggs may not be the same. Our squashes might not be the same. When I say sweet potato, for example, the first thing most Americans will think of is a Beauregard, which is an orange sweet potato, right? But for a lot of Southern history, it were white, fleshed, red skinned, or yellow. And they weren't always meant to be pumpkiny and sweet. There are varieties that were that way. But you often hear people talk about yams. Well, they weren't called yams because orange sweet potato was the same thing as a West African yam. They called yam because the word means to eat in Wolof and Senegambia. It's also the same word used in Jamaican patois and Gullah Geechee. Yam, to eat. And it really comes from the fact that Africans are seeing cassava and sweet potato and going, "Oh, you eat that thing. What is this thing? Oh, you eat it. Yum." And then that term, so sweet cassava in Wolof is yum, yum bi, the thing you eat. And then in the South, sweet potatoes become yam because they are the substitute for cassava and yam, which were a deep part of the diet in West Africa. So in order to get to the heart of authenticity, like so for example, I'll give you a quick example.
Sure.
Charles Ball, who was a contemporary of Frederick Douglass, who wrote a much more thorough book on how enslaved people lived in that part of the South at that time, early 1800s. He talks about how there was a hog that was superannuated or sick, and they said, okay, you all can have that hog. So they kill the hog with and butcher it, and they distribute the meat. And he talks about how they made a stew with sweet potatoes, the pork, and herbs. He talks about parsley or sage or something, and there's red pepper in there, some salt, whatever. And this one pot meal, which I talk about in the book, is one pot meals are very important to Southern cooking because every culture had them. He talks about sweet potatoes. Well, they're going to be white or yellow. The hog is probably not going to taste like anything people eat today. It's not going to be as. It's probably going to be something close to a razorback. You remember Old Yeller,
Hmm.
you know? And the herbs, yes, black people had parsley, sage, rosemary, and thyme, like Simon and Garfunkel. And these were medicinal as well as culinary. And all of those were actually cultivated in Europe and in Africa, basil included. Basil is very important. They call basil scent leaf in Sierra Leone, Salome, one of my homelands. And it's was my both of my grandmothers said you grow basil inside the house to keep the evil out. Well, it's really good for mosquitoes, right? But I guess the point here is that in order to understand those historic recipes, those ingredients that are so familiar to us, we have to understand that the corn changes, that sweet corn wasn't really a thing. They ate green corn, which meant young corn. And that was, and the sap, that was, can you imagine having a different palate than your ancestors, where the green corn was tasty, but it wasn't like this, sugar sweet corn that we eat today, honey and pearl with the butter slathered all over. That's
Right.
not how it worked.
Right.
And so if you understand that, and you understand that a lot of people think of authentic Southern cooking as cooking of the Depression, because
Hmm.
that's the last major era people remember. Remember, it went from that antebellum way on the hearth to the postbellum way with the cast iron stove to the Depression, where now we have to live in austerity through the 1940s and do victory gardens through the space age, industrialization of food, and all those changed Southern cooking. I had an argument with a light, playful argument with an older man in North Carolina saying, "Oh, pimento cheese goes back to the Civil War." The hell it does. Well, no, I mean, black people weren't eating a whole lot of cheese. We were lactose intolerant. That wasn't a big thing for us. The furthermore is that that's very much a product of that Southern living church cookbook, ladies magazine,
Mm.
and also, mayonnaise is now industrial. Cheese is now industrial. Pimentos can be grown without a high cost. That's also part of the story of authenticity because once you kind of work through all these different Jenga layers in Southern history and culture, you understand, you come to understand there's very little that we eat that is authentic to the very beginning. But when you find it, I'm gonna give you that point.
Sure.
When you find it, it is it's a marvel because you feel that connection in your gut and your heart and your mind from the generations that came before.
Well said. We have a couple minutes left. Let me ask you now about just where you are in terms of you. We kind of referenced it, and I know it's hard not to talk about our current situation in terms of politics and things like that. But as you're out there now with a new book, um, is there a different sensibility you have, or is there more of an urgency to make sure that these stories in our history and our culture is being told in the way that we want to tell it, to counteract some of the ways that are the barriers that are being put into place?
Urgency, absolutely, an urgency to make sure that people understand the value of our storytelling, our history, our hidden figures to expand that name, but also to help people realize that they have history in their own family. You don't have to go to some great blacks and wax to find who you are. Talk to your elders, talk to your parents, talk to your aunties and uncles, talk to talk to anybody, people in the community who you're not even no blood related to. Learn everything you can.
Hmm.
My thing is this. We're eternally arguing back and forth about enslavement as if we need to argue about it at all. Okay? Here's the big issue for me, ladies and gentlemen. How we survived enslavement, how we survived Jim Crow, how we survived all of that is the medicine to what we're going through now.
Mm-hmm.
It's the medicine. I don't learn all this stuff and do all this work and study this and study that because I think people thought I had some kind of weird fetish for those traumas. No, I was taught from the very beginning, this is how you're going to survive this. And of course, here I am going, oh, but that ain't gonna happen again. Boy,
Hmm. We're here.
learn what I tell you. And it's funny how like the racism is using tricks from the past. They're trying to recreate Reconstruction, post Reconstruction. But the funny thing is, we're going to take away those books. We're going to take away your access to education. Okay, what are we going to do now?
Mm-hmm.
What are we going to do what our ancestors did? Amplify. We're going to use all the tools of the 21st century to do that. We are going to do what we have to do. We're going to learn those little tips and hints and think about the importance of what did my other grandmother say? Know how to do everything.
Right.
Know how to keep yourself employed, how to keep yourself eating, keep a roof over your head on your own terms. Educate yourself in a certain way. Um, I think one thing people need to know in this conversation is that food has played a huge role in cultural politics, especially Southern food and Black food in Venn diagram. And there's a lot of anger. There's a lot of backlash anger from white people and others about this. Some of our own people were just like, I don't hear about that. I don't want no movies about slavery. Ah, nah, nah, nah. And now they try to, oh, well, you can't take that away. Okay, which one is it? Please tell me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Is it, slavery trauma on TikTok? That's okay. But books and learning and movies that are like 12 Years a Slave, that was one of the best movies ever made because it was real. It didn't sugarcoat nothing. And the main character is not Southern. He's a black man from New York who is happily living far away from this other reality, and then learns that most of his people are in hell. and he doesn't know what to do with it because he's in hell until he gets rescued.
Hmm.
And then, poor Patsy is left down there, broken. Can't come with him. We don't know what happens to her in real life. So I ask people, what is it? Is it certain people's voices, certain people's narratives that makes one thing better than the other? Let's talk about that. Let's talk about what that means. But at the same point in time, I don't want to be in this hamster wheel of sorrow. I want to be truly progressive and truly working towards solutions. We don't have time for that. I've heard this message that we should be well, we had the the Harlem Renaissance, we had Motown. No, I'm not doing no lynch. A man was lynched yesterday. Let's have a Harlem Renaissance party. And I'm not doing no Motown where we get bitten by dogs and water hose in the street. That's not my art. My art is let the resistance swing.
Hmm.
My art is no, this stops today. We ain't never going back. This stops today. And by the way, you already have our blood in you. You
Hmm.
already have our culture in you. You already have so many things, and you're trying to erase that reality. I'm going to tell you through food that you nourish your bodies with our culture, and you're not going to stop. Most hilarious story in the past 10 years was huge North Carolina Klan rally, and they went to a black restaurant, soul food restaurant, to get the food to cater it.
Wow.
Y'all can't help yourselves, can you?
Wow.
And it's not, and also it's not just about racial dynamics. It's also about how we see ourselves relate to others. People were talking about Ryan Coogler Centers and the presence of Mississippi Chinese, and I'm like, I have some of those recipes in this book because I want people to know there was community. I was before Centers, right? Or that there's Latino people in the South, and Middle Eastern people, and Vietnamese people in the South, and those stories, indigenous people are still here. All need to be told, and also just the fact that whether we like it or not, you know, the truly poor and colorblind, whatever that means, people did eat together over 3 centuries and had to develop a culinary culture that fit a mixing that had never happened before. So once you put all that together and think it through and process it, you begin to understand where we're coming from and where we're going to go.
Hmm.
And if you can face this history with open eyes, or as the Yoruba say, oju inu, which is also the term for the face. The altar is called the face of the Orisha, with open eyes. That's how I roll. I put all those pieces together. Then you're going to be okay. But if you close your eyes and you fall asleep and you ain't woke, look forward to repeating 300 years in the next 100 years.
Hmm.
It's not pretty.
Mm-mm. No, no. Well, I want to thank you for taking on that mantle, you and others. I know you're not out there alone and you have
Oh no,
allies.
I'm
So
glad.
just thank you guys for carrying it forward because it's such a critical time. And the advantage I think we have this time is that, we know the history. We can articulate the history. We can tell the history. Regardless of what's going on, we still have that ability and that right and that wherewithal to do that. So books like yours, the scholarship that you're doing is so critical now. And again, I just want to thank you for taking it on and putting it out in people's face because it's needed. It's definitely needed.
Thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be here, and I'm so thrilled to be um, on a program with us on the platform
Thank you.
so
Thank
we
you.
can have these conversations. I always tell people I run to spend a dollar in our community, and I run to make sure our voices are amplified, people who amplify our voices.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's
Thank
what
you.
I try to do. So, last thing for you, if people want more information about you,
Sure.
they want more information about the book, where can they go?
So, everybody, go to the Cooking Gene on Instagram. I'm also the Cooking Gene on Threads, Kosher Soul on Blue Sky. Michael W. Twitty is my main page, and the Cooking Gene is another page I have on Facebook. Afro Culinary, sometimes I post, sometimes I don't. but Instagram is your first line of defense. And I typically post links about the book. Phaidon is the publisher, and you can go directly to them for links, or go to your preferred uh, book retailer. I always tell people, if you can, please support Black-owned bookstores, independent bookstores, or through them. But if you just do the Amazon or Barnes and Noble thing, that's cool too. Also going to the publisher and buying from them. I have first edition signed copies, so you can go there and get one from me. I signed over 500 pieces of paper, so y'all better go buy one because I didn't do that for nothing.
Or die.
But yeah, those are good ways to reach me and stay in touch with my work.
Excellent, excellent. Well, Chef Michael Twitty, world-renowned chef, author of the brand new book, Recipes from the American South. I can't thank you. Want to thank you so much just for coming on the Edric Show and having this conversation with me. I really appreciate it, and I hope
Thank
I
you,
can have you
sir.
on again.
Absolutely, anytime.
Absolutely, absolutely. This has been another edition of the Edric Show. As promised, intelligent conversation with interesting people. Hit that subscribe button, ring that notification bell, and you'll get the content I post each and every week. I want to thank you for tuning in, and I will catch you on the next episode.